At Vale Holdings, stability was a commodity, bought and paid for with Julian Vale's unwavering confidence. The executive suite on the 42nd floor was more than an office. It was a cathedral of industry, paneled in dark mahogany and draped in the silence of absolute power. My role as Julian's executive assistant meant I was the ghost in the machine. I saw the schedules, the unvoiced threats, and the carefully curated appearances. The board was a collection of allies and puppets, all moving in a choreography Julian had perfected. But even in a kingdom of glass and steel, there are cracks. Small ones, a missed glance in the elevator, a slightly too long pause in a conference call. Julian felt it too, the subtle shift in the winds of shareholder sentiment. The foundation was solid, but for the first time I felt the air grow thin. The silence of the 42nd floor wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the breath held before a scream. The historic shareholder vote was less than 24 hours away. The motion was simple: the removal of Julian Vale as chairman. It was a move led by institutional investors who had grown tired of his autocratic style. Julian's response was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He called for clarification sessions, which were really just high-pressure briefings designed to remind the board members exactly who controlled their bonuses. I watched him squeeze. He didn't use a hammer, he used a silken cord. He reminded them of past loyalties and future promises, but I could see the sweat on the brows of the directors. The numbers were leaking. The proxy votes were coming in. For the first time in his career, Julian Vale was losing. The king was cornered, and a cornered man is a dangerous thing to watch. He knew the count wasn't in his favor. By 10 p.m., the office was a ghost town. Julian had sent everyone home, citing the need for private reflection before the vote. But he didn't leave. He stayed behind that locked glass door, a shadow moving against the gold light. I stayed too. I told him I was finishing the board binders, but I was really watching the monitors. Trust had eroded months ago, replaced by a cold, mutual surveillance. Julian thought he had isolated himself, but I was the one holding the lens. The isolation was his weapon, or so he thought. He didn't know about the upgrade I'd requested for the suite's security, a hidden 4K feed that bypasses the main server. Every alliance he thought he had was falling apart in those private calls. He was alone, and in the silence of that suite, I saw the mask finally slip. The confidence wasn't gone. It had just curdled into something far more desperate. He reached for the official ballot box. The manipulation began with a simple blade. Julian didn't just want to win, he wanted to rewrite the reality of his defeat. I watched through the hidden feed as he methodically opened the sealed proxy ballots from the institutional investors. Language was his first tool of distortion. In public, he spoke of shareholder alignment. In private, he was physically replacing no votes with yes tallies he had printed earlier that evening. It was a surgical alteration of the company's future. The shredder became the rhythm of his lies. Each original ballot that didn't fit his narrative was reduced to vertical ribbons of parchment. He was erasing the voices of the very people he claimed to lead, one document at a time. He looked into the scanner light, his expression one of pure, focused intent. He wasn't just committing fraud, he was perfecting it. He believed if the paper trail was destroyed, the truth would simply cease to exist. Julian's manipulation was a masterpiece of detail. He didn't just swap the ballots, he aged the paper, mimicked the signatures, and even used the same ink weight. He was building a wall of fake consensus that no one would think to question. I watched him work for 3 hours. He was so thorough that he almost convinced me. But the digital clock on the wall didn't lie. At exactly 11:43 p.m., he paused. He looked toward the glass door, right where I was standing in the shadows. He said my name. "Mara, I know you're there." My heart didn't race, it went cold. I didn't step out of the shadows. I just watched as he turned back to the shredder and dropped the final evidence of the real vote into the teeth. "Come in, Mara. Let's discuss the morning's presentation." He wasn't inviting me in for a meeting. He was inviting me into the conspiracy, or he was inviting me to be its next victim. I realized I wasn't just a witness anymore. I walked into the suite, the smell of ozone from the shredder hanging in the air. Julian didn't look up. He was busy resealing the ballot box with fresh wax, his movements steady and practiced. "We have a problem with the tally, Mara," he said. He looked me in the eye and handed me a folder. It was the forged results. "The shareholders have spoken and they've chosen stability. I need you to ensure these reach the auditors by 8 a.m. sharp." He was asking me to sign my own career's death warrant. I took the folder. The paper felt heavy with the weight of his betrayal, not just of the company, but of the trust I had built for 7 years. He thought my loyalty was a given, an asset he had already depreciated to zero. He was wrong. You've always been my most reliable asset, Mara. Don't disappoint me now. The betrayal was complete. He had used me to cover the crime, making me an accomplice before the first word was ever spoken. He didn't see the camera in the vent. The hidden damage wasn't just the fraud, it was the systemic rot that allowed a man like Julian to believe he could rewrite history. I sat at my desk, the forged ballots in one hand and the 4K recording of the crime on my screen. I watched the footage again. Frame by frame, I saw the exact moment the seal broke. This wasn't just evidence of a crime, it was a map of his soul. Every strip of paper in that shredder represented a career, an investment, a life he was willing to destroy. The damage was irreversible, but it was still invisible to the world. Tomorrow morning, the board would walk into that room believing they were participating in a democratic process. They had no idea the game was already over. Or so Julian thought. I had the power to stop him, but I knew that simply reporting it wouldn't be enough. He would bury the investigation. I needed something louder. I needed a public execution in the heart of the empire. I needed a revenge that would stick. The revenge setup began at 2 a.m. I didn't go home. I stayed in the shadows of the IT closet, building a presentation that Julian wouldn't be able to turn off. I synchronized the hidden camera footage with the forged tally sheets he had given me. I embedded the evidence directly into the chairman's final remarks deck. When he clicked to show the official results, the screen wouldn't show the fake tallies. It would show the recording of him printing them at 11:43 p.m. last night. It was a digital trap. I also set up a secondary feed to the governance observers and the major institutional investors. When the reveal happened, it wouldn't just be in the room, it would be live streamed to every major shareholder in the country. He would have nowhere to hide. I walked into the boardroom as the sun began to hit the glass. The room was perfect, cold, silent, and ready for its purpose. I placed the forged folder on the chairman's desk. The setup was complete, and the cost was my own career. I didn't care. The morning meeting felt like a victory lap. Julian was in top form, radiating the charm of a man who had already won. He shook hands, shared jokes, and looked every bit the leader the board wanted him to be. The proxies were counted, and the air was light. The auditors announced the results, a landslide victory for Julian. He accepted the news with a practiced humility, thanking the board for their continued trust. The resolution was perfect. The fraud had worked. He looked at me and nodded, a silent thank you for my loyalty. For 10 minutes, the company belonged to him again. The tension had vanished, replaced by the relief of a crisis averted. Julian stood up for his final remarks, his hand reaching for the remote to display the future vision slides I had prepared. He was untouchable. "Before we conclude," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room, "I want to show you the path forward." He pressed the button. The screen flickered, but it didn't show a chart. It showed a timestamp, 11:43 p.m. The false resolution was over. The reversal hit like a physical blow. The room went from a celebration to a morgue in 3 seconds. On the massive screen, Julian Vale was caught in 4K, his face illuminated by the scanner as he physically replaced the real ballots with the fakes now sitting on the table. He didn't move. He just stared at his own image, his hand still holding the remote. The directors turned to look at him, then at the screen, then at the folder in front of them. The real votes were being displayed alongside his yes versions. The math was devastating. He had lost by 15%. The governance observers were already on their phones. The institutional investors were seeing the same feed on their tablets. The truth wasn't just out, it was inescapable. Julian tried to speak, but no sound came out. The mask hadn't just slipped, it had shattered. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a realization that was too late. He saw the camera in my hand, and he saw the end of career notification on his own phone. The revenge was inevitable, and the cost was everything he had ever built. He was gone. The revenge execution was silent and irreversible. Julian Vale was removed from the building within the hour, his name already being scrubbed from the digital directory. The legal consequences would take years, but the reputational death was instantaneous and absolute. He was a non-person. I sat in his office one last time. The smell of ozone was gone, replaced by the sterile scent of cleaners erasing his presence. I had destroyed him, but I hadn't saved the company. The board was already looking for a new Julian, someone who could lie better or at least keep the shredder quiet. The aftershock spread through the industry, but the system itself didn't change. It just learned to be more careful. The collateral damage was my own career. I was blacklisted by noon, but as I walked out, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a consequence. I was the price he had to pay. The deeper system remains unchanged, absorbing the scandal and continuing its march. Julian Vale was just a temporary anomaly in a machine designed for power. In the end, it wasn't about justice, it was just about who was left holding the lens when the lights went out.
Select now another video in our series of family and company dramas. They are all powerful stories of people coming back stronger after they have been humiliated or hurt by family members or their management. Always make sure you stay strong. Let nobody ever tell you what you are worth. You know the best. Of course.